Deal with overuse injuries, but their cardiovascular system is finely tuned. Even though I was able to compete and accomplish so much with my broken body, I never felt that great. I learned to endure and overcome, and as the doctor continued to download the essentials, I realized for the first time in my entire life, I'd also been pretty fucking lucky. You know, the backhanded brand of luck, where you have a hole in your heart, but are thanking God that it hasn't killed you yet. Because when you have an ASD like mine, and you dive deep underwater, gas bubbles, which are supposed to travel through the pulmonary blood vessels to be filtered through the lungs, might leak from that hole upon ascent and recirculate as weaponized embolisms that can clog blood vessels in the brain and lead to a stroke, or block an artery to the heart and cause cardiac arrest. It's like diving with a dirty bomb floating inside you, never knowing when or where it might go off. I wasn't alone in this fight. 1 out of every 10 children are born with this same defect, but in most cases, the hole closes on its own, and surgery isn't required. In just under 2,000 American children each year, surgery is required, but is usually administered before a patient starts school, because there are better screening processes these days. Most people my age who were born with ASD left the hospital in their mother's arms and lived with a potential deadly problem without a clue, until, like me, their hearts started giving them trouble in their 30s. If I had ignored my warning signs, I could have dropped dead during a 4-mile run. That's why, if you're in the military and are diagnosed with an ASD, you can't jump out of airplanes or scuba dive. And if anyone had known of my condition, there is no way the Navy ever would have let me become a SEAL. It's astonishing I even made it through Hell Week, Badwater, or any of those other races. I'm truly amazed you could do all you've done with this condition, the doctor said. I nodded. He thought I was a medical marvel, some kind of outlier, or simply a gifted athlete blessed with amazing luck. To me, it was just further evidence that I didn't owe my accomplishments to God-given talent, or great genetics. I had a fucking hole in my heart. I was running on a tank perpetually half full, and that meant my life was absolute proof of what's possible when someone dedicates themselves to harnessing the full power of the human mind. 3 days later, I was in surgery. And boy, did the doctor fuck that one up. First off, the anesthesia didn't take all the way, which meant I was half awake as the surgeon sliced through my inner thigh, inserted a catheter into my femoral artery, and once it reached my heart, deployed a helix patch through that catheter and moved it into place, supposedly patching the hole in my heart. Meanwhile, they had a camera down my throat, which I could feel as I gagged and struggled to endure the 2-hour-long procedure. After all of that, my troubles were supposed to have been over. The doctor mentioned that it would take time for my heart tissue to grow around and seal the patch, but after a week, he cleared me for light exercise. Roger that, I thought, as I dropped to the floor to do a set of push-ups as soon as I got home. Almost immediately, my heart went into atrial fibrillation, also known as AFib. My pulse spiked from 120 to 230, back to 120, then up to 250. I felt dizzy and had to sit down as I stared at my heart rate monitor, while my breathing normalized. Once again, my resting heart rate was in the 80s. In other words, nothing had changed. I called the cardiologist who tagged it as a minor side effect and begged patience. I took him at his word and rested for a few more days, then hopped on the bike for an easy ride home from work. At first, all went well, but after about 15 miles, my heart went into AFib once again. My pulse rate bounced from 120 to 230 and back again across the imaginary graph in my mind's eye with no rhythm whatsoever. Kate drove me straight to Balboa Hospital. After that visit and second and third opinions, it was clear that the patch had either failed or was insufficient to cover the entire hole and that I'd need a second heart surgery. The Navy didn't want any part of that. They feared further complications and suggested I scale back my lifestyle, accept my new normal, and a retirement package. Yeah, right. Instead, I found a better doctor at Balboa, who said we'd have to wait several months before we could even contemplate another heart surgery. In the meantime, I couldn't jump or dive, and obviously couldn't operate in the field, so I stayed in recruitment. It was a different life, no doubt, and I was tempted to feel sorry for myself. After all, this thing that hit me out of the clear blue changed the entire landscape of my military career. But I'd been training for life, not ultra races, and I refused to hang my head. I knew that if I maintained a victim's mentality, I wouldn't get anything at all out of a fucked up situation, and I didn't want to sit home defeated all day long. So I used the time to perfect my recruitment presentation. I wrote up sterling AARs and became much more detail-oriented in my administrative work. Does that sound boring to you? Fuck yes, it was boring. But it was honest, necessary work, and I used it to keep my mind sharp for when the moment came that I'd be able to drop back into the fight for real. Or so I hoped. A full 14 months after the first surgery, I was once again rolling through a hospital corridor, on my back, staring at the fluorescent lights in the ceiling, headed to pre-op with no guarantees. While the techs and nurses shaved me down and prepped me up, I thought about all I'd accomplished in the military and wondered, was it enough? If the docs couldn't fix me this time, would I be willing to retire, satisfied? That question lingered in my head until the anesthesiologist placed an oxygen mask over my face and counted down softly in my ear. Just before lights out, I heard the answer erupt from the abyss of my jet black soul. Fuck no! There's so much to unpack here, but I'm going to start with a simple question.
Yes, sir.
Which is, your resting heart rate in the 30s?
Yeah, it was sick, man. I had trained so much. So, as you know, I did a bunch of heart rate training. So I was really big into zone training. So I did 80 to 90% of my runs at a zone 2. So there's like 5 zones. Zone 5 being like Usain Bolt, where you're trying to run a 100-yard dash. That's as fast as you can go. So zone 1, so that's zone 5, fast as you can go. Zone 1 is like that recovery thing I would do on Sundays sometimes. I would sit on the bike and I would spin real low at like a 90 to 110 heart rate. That's recovery. Zone 2 was that's where I would do all the fat burning.
Right.
That was my all-day zone. That trained my heart.
Is that like orange or is that yellow?
I'm not for sure exactly what color that is.
It's different now,
yeah,
right?
It's different colors. Okay. So for me, though, I just knew that was like between like a 140 and 150 heart rate, and I would do that all the time, but for hours and hours a day. So it got my actual resting heart rate down to the 30s.
It's amazing because most like people who I guess weekend warriors who are at least working out 4 times a week or something can be in the 60s, right?
Right.
And then professional athletes tend to be 40s and 50s, right?
Right.
But 30s is pretty low.
Oh yeah, 30s is real low, man.
It's like some Yoda shit, bro.
Yeah, that's some Yoda shit. Well, I put some Yoda time in, man, but there was no Jedi Force. It was Goggin's Force.
That's it. Anything you want to say? I mean, we cover it pretty well. I don't know if you want to underline anything about that period in your life.
Well, one big thing here that kept me going is I kept on, and there's a lot more challenges to come. I mean, we're just 8 chapters in, and what's funny is every chapter there's a new challenge for me, a new big hurdle to overcome. And like I said before, obstacles in your life, you need friction to grow. And those obstacles are friction. And that's how I started looking at everything in life. It's how you look at the obstacles in your life versus woe is me. My life sucks. God, why me? Why me? Why me? My mentality was like, hey man, you know what? If I can get through this, I'm even harder than I was before. Like the more I got hit, the harder I got hit, the more I was like, okay man, you know what? Yeah, I would get sad. You wouldn't have fucking heart surgery. I mean, it was killing, but hey man, you're gonna have heart surgery regardless. It is yours to own. I can approach it 2 ways. Either all negative, man, my life sucks, woe is me, or hey man, I'm having heart surgery. Let's see how fast I can get better. Let's see this, let's see that. Let's have a great attitude. And another thing that kept me going was, back in the day, I always thought growing up, I was the weakest man that God ever created. And my whole goal in life, I wanted to, see these uncommon men and work with them and do all these hard things and overcome all these obstacles. But my goal was to be the hardest man that God ever created. And that whole thing, you know, it wasn't about being a SEAL. It wasn't about, you know, about being a Ranger and all these other things I did in my life. It was strictly about when these times came up, like, hey, Goggins, you're going to have heart surgery. How do you attack that? That's what that's what hardness means to me. All the obstacles in your life, it's not about running fast or being some guy who can handle cold water. How do you handle what life throws at you? And I realized that's what I want to do good at. That's what I want to be an all-star at. And that's, you know, this was another time for me to say, okay, man, this is your second heart surgery. How are you going to handle it?
Well, there's no doubt you're an all-star at it. I mean, and I think we have to go back to childhood where you did have the time where you were in the woe is me.
Right.
You did live in woe is me in times. And it doesn't mean that you didn't have, you know, some parts of your childhood that you loved. You had your friends. You had your popularity. You played ball.
Yep.
But you also had a lot of woe is me, and you felt it. And then you fixed that.
Right.
And then you fell back into it. And then you fixed it again. And I always say, you know, to me, life is reps, right? It takes reps. And you got those reps in early, and that, I think, you had to contribute to your attitude here.
Well, think about all those, you know, all those friends and all those good times and all that crap. Yeah, it's true, I had them. But the one thing our mind does is that we focus on the one small thing we don't have. You know, we can have a great life, great wife, great husband, beautiful home, all this shit. But I have this one small thing in my life that's not so great, and that's what you focus on. And that's what I learned that I was doing. I was like, my God, man, my life isn't that bad, but I focused on that one kid at school who called me a nigger. The one kid at school, not the whole school. The one kid that was beating me down, that was my reality. Oh my God, everybody hates me. That's not the truth, man. It's not the truth. So I first had to find out the truth. I didn't see that. Then I had to realize this. I was a weak kid. My life had made me a very fragile, insecure, weak person. And in realizing that, I wanted to master my fears. I wanted to become a master of my fears. So many of us that are afraid of something, we just shy away from it. The best way to overcome anything in life is to become a master of what you're afraid of. Become a master of your insecurities. Become a master of all that stuff. Learn about it. A lot of times you just don't know what the hell you're afraid of.
Well, it's like you've been saying all along, it's yours to own.
That's right.
And once you own it, and own the inevitability of the heart surgery, you can then spin it and use it in some way to grow.
Exactly, man. A lot of this stuff in your life that's happening to you, it's not going away. It's not going to go away. So you better go ahead and face it head on.
Beautiful. All right, let's get into the challenge 8. And we know what it is. We talked about it in this chapter. Challenge 8. Schedule it in. It's time to compartmentalize your day. Too many of us have become multitaskers, and that's created a nation of half-asses. This will be a 3-week challenge. During week 1, go about your normal schedule, but take notes. When do you work? Are you working non-stop or checking your phone? The Moment app will tell you. How long are your meal breaks? When do you exercise, watch TV, or chat to friends? How long is your commute? Are you driving? I want you to get super detailed and document it all with timestamps. This will be your baseline, and you'll find plenty of fat to trim. Most people waste 4 to 5 hours on a given day, and if you can learn to identify and utilize it, you'll be on your way toward increased productivity. In week 2, build an optimal schedule. Lock everything into place in 15 to 30-minute blocks. Some tasks will take multiple blocks or entire days. Fine. When you work, only work on one thing at a time. Think about the task in front of you and pursue it relentlessly. When it comes time for the next task on your schedule, place that first one aside and apply the same focus. Make sure your meal breaks are adequate, but not open-ended. And schedule in exercise and rest too. But when it's time to rest, actually rest. No checking email or bullshitting on social media. If you are going to work hard, you must also rest your brain. Make notes with timestamps in week 2. You may still find some residual dead space. By week 3, you should have a working schedule that maximizes your effort without sacrificing sleep. Post photos of your schedule with the hashtags #Can'tHurtMe, #TalentNotRequired. Chapter 9. Uncommon Amongst Uncommon. The anesthesia took hold, and I felt myself wheeling backward until I landed in a scene from my past. We were humping through the jungle in the dead of night. Our movement was stealthy and silent, but swift. Had to be. He who hits first wins the fight, most of the time. We crested a pass, took shelter beneath a thick stand of towering mahogany trees in the triple canopy jungle, and tracked our targets through night vision goggles. Even without sunlight, the tropical heat was intense, and sweat slid down the side of my face like dewdrops on a window pane. I was 27 years old, and my platoon and Rambo fever dreams had become real as fuck. I blinked twice, exhaled, and on the OIC signal, opened fire. My entire body reverberated with the rhythm of the M60. A belt-fed machine gun, firing 500 to 650 rounds per minute. As the 100-round belt fed the growling machine and flared from the barrel, adrenaline flooded my bloodstream and saturated my brain. My focus narrowed. There was nothing else but me, my weapon, and the target I was shredding with zero apologies. It was 2002. I was fresh out of buds, and as a full-time Navy SEAL, I was now officially one of the world's most fit and deadly warriors, and one of the hardest men alive. Or so I thought. But this was years before my descent into the ultra rabbit hole. September 11th was still a fresh, gaping wound in the American collective consciousness, and its ripple effects changed everything for guys like us. Combat was no longer a mythical state of mind we aspired to. It was real, and ongoing in the mountains, villages, and cities of Afghanistan. Meanwhile, we were moored in fucking Malaysia, awaiting orders, hoping to join the fight. And we trained like it. After BUDS, I moved on to SEAL qualification training, where I officially earned my trident before landing in my first platoon. Training continued with jungle warfare exercises in Malaysia. We rappelled and fast-roped up and down from hovering helicopters. Some men were trained as snipers, and since I was the biggest man in the unit, my weight was back up to 250 pounds by then, I scored the job of carrying the pig, the nickname for the M60, because it sounded like the grunt of a barnyard hog. Most people dreaded pig detail, but I was obsessed with that gun. The weapon alone was 20 pounds, and each belt of 100 rounds weighed in at 7 pounds. I carried 6 to 7 of those, 1 on the gun, 4 on my waist, and 1 in a pouch strapped to my rucksack. The weapon, and my 50-pound ruck, everywhere we went, and was expected to move just as fast as everyone else. I had no choice. We train as we fight, and live ammo is necessary to mimic true combat, so we could perfect the SEAL battle maxim: shoot, move, communicate. That meant keeping barrel discretion on point. We couldn't let our weapons spray just anywhere. That's how friendly fire incidents happen, and it takes great muscle discipline and attention to detail to know where you're aiming in relation to the location of your teammates at all times, especially when armed with a pig. Maintaining a high standard of safety and delivering deadly force on target when duty calls is what makes an average SEAL a good operator. Most people think once you're a SEAL, you're always in the circle, but that's not true. I learned quickly that we were constantly being judged, and the second I was unsafe, whether I was still a new guy or a veteran operator, I'd be out. I was one of 3 new guys in my first platoon, and one of them had to have his gun taken away because he was so unsafe. For 10 days, we moved through the Malaysian jungle, sleeping in hammocks, paddling dugouts, carrying our weapons all day and night, and he was stuck hauling a fucking broomstick like the Wicked Witch of the West. Even then he couldn't hack it, and wound up getting booted. Our officers in that first platoon kept everybody honest, and I respected them for it. In combat, nobody just turns into Rambo, Dana DeCoster told me recently. Dana was second in command on my first platoon with SEAL Team 5. These days, he's Director of Operations at BUDS. We push ourselves hard, so when bullets do start flying, we fall back on really good training. And it's important that the point where we fall back is so high, we know we're going to outperform the enemy. We may not become Rambo, but we'll be damn close. A lot of people are fascinated by the weaponry and gunfights SEALs utilize and engage in, but that was never my favorite part of the job. I was damn good at it, but I preferred going to war with myself. I'm talking about strong physical training, and my first platoon delivered that too. We would go on long run-swim runs most mornings before work. We weren't just getting miles in either. We were competing, and our officers led from the front. Our OIC and Dana, his second, were two of the best athletes in the entire platoon, and my platoon chief, Chris Beck, who now goes by Kristen Beck and is one of the most famous trans women on Twitter, talk about being the only, was a hard motherfucker too. It's funny, Dana said. The OIC and I never really talked about our philosophy on PT. We just competed. I wanted to beat him, and he wanted to beat me, and that got people talking about how hard we were getting after it. There was never a doubt in my mind that Dana was off his damn rocker. I remember before we shipped out for Indonesia, with stops in Guam, Malaysia, Thailand, and Korea, we did a number of training dives off San Clemente Island. Dana was my swim buddy, and one morning he challenged me to do a training dive in 55-degree water without a wetsuit, because that's how the predecessors to the SEALs did it when they prepared the beaches of Normandy for the famous D-Day invasion during World War II. Let's go old school and dive in shorts with our dive knives, he said. He had the animalistic mentality I thrived on, and I wasn't about to back down from that challenge. We swam and dove together all over Southeast Asia, where we trained elite military units in Malaysia and sharpened the skills of Thai Navy SEALs, the crew of frogmen who saved the soccer kids in the cave in the summer of 2018. They were engaged with an Islamist insurgency in South Thailand. Wherever we deployed, I loved those PT mornings above all else. Pretty soon, every man in that platoon was competing against everyone else. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to catch our two officers, and usually came in third place. Didn't matter. It wasn't important who won, because everybody was capping personal bests almost every day, and that's what stayed with me. The power of a competitive environment to amp up an entire platoon's commitment and achievement. This was exactly the environment I'd been dreaming of when I classed up for BUDS. We were all living the SEAL ethos, and I couldn't wait to see where it took us individually and as a unit once we tagged into the fight. But as war raged in Afghanistan, all we could do was sit tight and hope our number was called. We were in a Korean bowling alley when we watched the invasion of Iraq together. It was depressing as hell. We had been training hard for an opportunity like that. Our foundation had been reinforced with all that PT and filled out with robust weapons and tactical training. We'd become a deadly unit, frothing to be a part of the action, and the fact that we were passed over again pissed us all off. So we took it out on one another every morning. Navy SEALs were treated like rock stars at the bases we visited around the world, and some of the guys partied like it. In fact, most SEALs enjoyed their share of big nights out, but not me. I'd gotten into the SEALs by living a Spartan lifestyle, and felt my job at night was to rest, recharge, and get my body and mind right for battle again the next day. I was forever mission ready, and my attitude earned respect from some, but our OIC tried to influence me to let go a little and become one of the boys. I had great respect for our OIC. He'd graduated from the Naval Academy and the University of Cambridge. He was clearly smart, a stud athlete, and a great leader, on his way to claiming a coveted spot on DevGru, so his opinion mattered to me. It mattered to all of us, because he was responsible for evaluating us, and those evaluations have a way of following you around and affecting your military career going forward. On paper, my first evaluation was solid. He was impressed with my skills and all-out effort, but he also dropped some off-the-record wisdom. "You know, Goggins," he said, "you'd understand the job a little better if you hung out with the guys more." That's when I learned the most about operating in the field. Hanging with the boys, hearing their stories. It's important to be part of the group. His words were a reality check that hurt. Clearly the OIC, and probably some of the other guys, thought I was a little different. Of course I was. I came from fucking nothing. I didn't get recruited to the Naval Academy. I didn't even know where the fuck Cambridge was. I wasn't raised around pools. I had to teach myself to swim. Fuck, I shouldn't even have been a SEAL, but I made it, and I thought that made me part of the group. But now, I realized I was part of the teams, not the brotherhood. I had to go out and socialize with the guys after hours to prove my value? That was a big ask for an introvert like me. Fuck that. I'd arrived in that platoon because of my intense dedication, and I wasn't about to let up. While people were out at night, I was reading up on tactics, weaponry, and war. I was a perpetual student. In my mind, I was training for opportunities that didn't even exist yet. Back then, you couldn't screen to join DevGru until after you finished your second platoon. But I was already preparing for that opportunity, and I refused to compromise who I was to conform to their unwritten rules. DevGru and the Army's Delta Force are considered the very best within the best of special operations. They get the tip of the spear missions, like the Osama bin Laden raid, and from that point on, I decided I wouldn't and couldn't be satisfied just being a vanilla Navy SEAL. Yeah, we were all uncommon, hard motherfuckers compared to civilians. But now I saw I was uncommon even among the uncommon. And if that's who I was, then so the fuck be it. I may as well separate myself even more. Not long after that evaluation, I won the morning race for the first time. I passed up Dana and the OIC in the last half mile, and never looked back. Platoon assignments last for 2 years, and by the end of our deployment, most of the guys were ready for a breather before tackling their next platoon, which, judging by the wars we were involved in, were almost guaranteed to take them into combat. I didn't want or need a break, because the uncommon among uncommon don't take breaks. After my first evaluation, I started studying the other branches in the military, Coast Guard not included, and read up on their special forces. Navy SEALs like to think that we're the best of them all, but I wanted to see for myself. I suspected all the branches employed a few individuals who stood out in the worst environments. I was on a hunt to find and train with those guys, because I knew they could make me better. Plus, I'd read that Army Ranger School was known as one of the best, if not the best, leadership schools in the entire military. So during my first platoon, I put 7 chits in with my OIC, hoping to get approval to go to Army Ranger School between deployments. I wanted to sponge more knowledge, I told them, and become more skilled as a special operator. Chits are special requests, and my first 6 were ignored. I was a new guy, after all, and some thought my focus should remain within naval special warfare, rather than stray into the dreaded Army. But I'd earned my own reputation after serving 2 years in my first platoon, and my 7th request went up the ladder to the CO in charge of SEAL Team 5. When he signed off, I was in. "Goggins," my OIC said after giving me the good news, "you are the type of motherfucker who wishes you were a POW just to see if you have what it takes to last." He was on to me. He knew the kind of person I was becoming, the type of man willing to challenge myself to the nth degree. We shook hands. The OIC was off to DevGru, and there was a chance we'd meet there soon. He told me that with 2 ongoing wars, for the first time, DevGru had opened their recruitment process to include guys off their first platoon. By always searching for more, and preparing my mind and body for opportunities that didn't yet exist, I was one of a handful of men on the West Coast approved by SEAL Team 5 brass to screen for Green Team, the training program for DevGru, just before I left for Army Ranger School. The Green Team screening process unfolds over 2 days. The first day is the physical fitness portion, which included a 3-mile run, a 1,200-meter swim, 3 minutes of sit-ups and push-ups, and a max set of pull-ups. I smoked everybody, because my first platoon had made me a much stronger swimmer and a better runner. Day 2 was the interview, which was more like an interrogation. Only 3 men from my screening class of 18 guys were approved for Green Team. I was one of them, which theoretically meant that after my second platoon, I'd be 1 step closer to joining DevGru. I could hardly wait. It was December 2003, and as imagined, my Special Forces career was zooming into hyperspace because I kept proving myself to be the most uncommon of motherfuckers and remained on track to become that one warrior. A few weeks later, I arrived in Fort Benning, Georgia for Army Ranger School. It was early December, and as the only Navy guy in a class of 308 men, I was greeted with skepticism by the instructors because a few classes before mine, a couple of Navy SEALs quit in the middle of training. Back then, they used to send Navy SEALs to Ranger School as punishment, so they may not have been the best representatives. I'd been begging to go, but the instructors didn't know that yet. They thought I was just another cocky special ops guy. Within hours, they stripped me and everyone else of our uniforms and reputations until we all looked the same. Officers lost rank, and minted Special Forces warriors like me became nobodies with a hell of a lot to prove. On day one, we were split into 3 companies, and I was appointed First Sergeant in command of Bravo Company. I got the job because the original First Sergeant had been asked to recite the Ranger Creed after a beatdown on the pull-up bar, and he was so tired, he fucked it up. To Rangers, their creed is everything. Our Ranger instructor was livid as he took stock of Bravo Company. All of us locked at attention. I don't know where you think you men are, but if you expect to become Rangers, then I expect you to know our creed. His eyes found me. I know for a fact Old Navy here doesn't know the Ranger Creed. You know, Goggins, I could keep reading this as is, but, I think you should take it from here. Like, what happened at that point?
You know what? So I was a student of the military. And the funny thing about it is people know me for running and all this other crap I did, man, but my life was about the military. And so this guy had no idea, he was looking at these guys, these other Navy SEALs that had quit. Man, I was studying the Ranger Creed, man, for months, maybe even a year before I even got there, man. And I was going through it. So when he called me up in front, I was like, okay, motherfucker, watch this one. So he only wanted me to say the first stanza, so I said the first stanza, and he tried to stop me. So so I'll say it right now. I still know it. Recognizing that I volunteered as a Ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession, I will always endeavor to uphold the prestige, honor, and high esprit corps of the Rangers. Acknowledging the fact that a Ranger is a more elite soldier who arrives at the cutting edge of battle by land, sea, or air, I accept the fact that as a Ranger, my country expects me to move further, faster, and fight harder than any other soldier. Never shall I fail my comrades. I will always keep myself mentally alert, physically strong, and morally straight. And I will shoulder more than my share of the task, whatever it may be, 100% and then some. Gallantly will I show the world that I'm a specially selected and well-trained soldier. My courtesy to superior officers, neatness of dress, and care of equipment shall set the example.